Back in the 90s, you should remember paradigm shift. Remember that? Some of you might remember that. If you're a part of any of the management in the IBM Guru, look, the paradigm shift. And we still use a little bit thinking outside that. But that call, you see, it invited us to look at things differently. And for a moment it was good. Another one is no ifs, ands, or buts. Or part and parcel. You probably hear that. If someone wants to impress upon you the importance of the entirety, part and parcel. But if you start thinking about it, your mind goes a different direction. You know, if our relationship is part and parcel, well, what are the parts? What are the parts? It's probably and financial to sports. The sports figures to give 110%. What does that mean? We've all heard that. The person that works really hard, it can't be denied. Well, where did that come from? So that's what we're going to explore this series now. In our Christian language, how can we be more precise, less wordy? Here I am preaching without a lot of contact, back and forth, but there you go. But the intention is to not make us feel guilty when we use language that we haven't thought about, but rather to think about language that sets ourselves and our neighbors and families free. So what do you say about that? Along with all the cliches that we can use, to acknowledge that cliches may do more harm than good, I think is one of the fundamental themes of this series. We need to be faithful to what we say and be saying that which is faithful to God's word. 30 years ago, March 13th would be the anniversary of something that happened in my life in the community. Trinity Lutheran Estevan is where I was serving when I was first graduated in 81. The afternoon, well, later in the evening, about, we believe around 7:38, a young boy broke into the church. We had befriended him, the other pastor and I. He lit a fire to stay warm. He was on his way to pick up, actually, cigarettes for his mom. He had done so, got some matches, was cold on the way home. We had given him a set of gloves. I remember giving him a set of gloves. 13-year-old boy lit a fire, foolishly, outside my office, actually, on the wing of the church. It smoldered. He left. Actually, had broken a window to get in, but locked the door on the way out very carefully. Lit a fire and smoldered through the night and then erupted. I got to call at 3:30. Now, in the midst of that loss of a building, and give thanks, nobody was hurt. But we heard many times, there's a reason for everything. And the church has been rebuilt, and marvelous, out of ashes has grown probably one of the nicest sanctuaries in, if not Western Canada, well, all of Canada, if not certainly Saskatchewan. Beautiful. White Estefan brick on the banks of the South River looking out. Great south exposure. Beautiful building. Everything, there's a reason. You get, oh sure, it's a new building. Great. But then when I thought about the fact that I lost 7 years of my notes, all my seminary, my first 3 years, all my pride in writing sermons, you see, everything has a reason. Well, maybe I'm supposed to preach last one, not really. Maybe that was the reason. And the gifts that my wife had commissioned beautiful ceramic communionware for my ordination. Did I need to lose that? Maybe I was too prideful, I don't know. My guitar that was given as a special gift, Norman blonde, a beautiful shell made in Quebec, you see. All I found was a little tuning peg in the ash, you see. Everything, I should believe this, you see. And I did get a beautiful plaque. He was an oilman. He hadn't been really involved in the church, but he gave me a beautiful plaque with these verses. I could have brought it here. And for this, all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to the purpose. I should believe that unequivocally. However, I'm not sure I quite know the exact reason for a lot of things that happen in my life. And yes, give thanks that God does. We see lots of things God has a purpose and plan. But does that help me understand in the midst of my grieving? Did I want to hear everything has a reason? I believe we say it to one another, though, in good conscience, don't we? We want people to have a sense of, in the midst of things that are out of control, God is in control. So that is the blessing of the cliche. That is the intent. Our first impulse, usually as people of care, is to extend God's grace to one another. We want people to feel better. In the midst of things we don't understand, there must be some reason. We offer that. Maybe it's an attempt to, as well, control the uncontrollable. To give an answer to something you cannot understand. And we believe, because we've heard it before, that this cliche now is the right thing to say to someone in grief, in mourning. Oh, there's got to be a reason. But I have to say sometimes it makes me confused, because I don't know the reason. cliches to look biblically would invite us to see a greater reality and not just a little reality. There is biblical patterns that support the idea that there is a reason for everything. So there is biblical background. Acts 2:23. We read about the fact that God has a deliberate plan in his language is foreknowledge, and in this text as well, there's predestination, that God saw everything. So Paul is using that as well. So there is grounds to say that there is reason for everything. But is that the best thing to say when we're hurting, when we're confused? The book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 7, it declares that people are called to endure hardship, which is a discipline, so that, like purity of silver or gold, you can be refined. So that there is a purpose in suffering. So there is that. So in one sense, you go, well, there's a reason for everything. We see a pattern in Joseph, the multicolored coat guy. Yeah, he got sold into slavery, and the Genesis writer is really, in Genesis 50, he is wonderfully teaching that God knew what was going to happen with the famine in Egypt, and Joseph got elevated really to be the minister of state, really, agriculture, and the prime minister, really, under Pharaoh. And that God used it, you see. And we do use the same language, I think rightfully so, as we seek to wrestle with the mind and meaning and will of God in our circumstances as well. Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery, and he sets them free, essentially, from a famine. But the downside of the cliche, I think we have to state, as much as there's a portion of truth, there's lots that is not true as we use it in a flippant way. There's a reason for everything. Well, some of you greeted me already at the door, and I appreciate it kindly. Some of you saw a brief picture in the paper, memorial. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my son's suicide, 15 years. And one of the very best things that happened this morning, a guy came and greeted me and said, "I'm sorry." That's all I said. Or, beautiful picture. Not trying to understand, not giving me any reasons. But just after preaching the sermon, I met at the door with people that cared immeasurably. What a gift. But the trouble with the cliche, there's a reason for everything. I don't actually believe it. There's a reason for it. I don't know it. I don't know the reason. I don't know the reason for disease, for natural disasters, for Syria. It drives me crazy what's happening. I don't know the reason for that stabbing 30 minutes after we all celebrated Happy New Year. That didn't make sense. Was there a reason that guy had to be stabbed? I don't think so. Maybe there is, but I don't believe it. I think he could have been someplace else at that moment. When we speak about a loving God, the John text, which is so powerful, all of John 4, that God is love, summarizing, that God is absolute love. And really the whole 66 books are all about God's love, but John 4:1 underlines it so precisely. God doesn't cause bad things to happen. It's not his cause. The book of Job, you see, that whole wrestle, that ancient wrestle, and our rabbis that have struggled as well. Why do good things happen to bad people? There's a wonderful phrase that we don't have to know the why, or we don't have to know the how of a situation if we can know the why. It's a bit of a cliche. I think there's some truth to that. But Jesus doesn't answer the hows of life. He does answer the whys in terms of why have I come? I've come to be with you. I'm remembering a conversation that I had with it happened to be a lineup. It was a secretary. I've been there waiting. And in that conversation, knew I was a pastor, we went back and forth. And we were talking about life and times. And some of the disappointments in life. And she summarized some of these situations in life that she saw as bad luck, bad timing, poor education, poor decisions. And I summarized a lot of things that happen in life that I don't understand as evil, bad, dark. Now she didn't like that. This person had a strong Christian background. I was able to use easily the Ephesians 5 text. It wasn't some big hang, but the Ephesians 5 I take literally. That we don't contend with mere flesh and blood, but against the powers, principalities, forces of darkness. But she was a Christian girl. Didn't like to hear that. Said, no, if people would just make better decisions, some of the, and she would use the word crap, some of the evil, some of the hardship in the world just wouldn't happen.